One example of an obstacle I faced early in my life is I started doing gymnastics when I was 3 years old, and I was convinced I was going to be in the Olympics, as I think most gymnastics-loving 3, 4, or 5-year-old girls probably are. And I started competing when I was fairly young, maybe 7. I would go to gymnastics meets and compete. And then all of a sudden when I turned 12, I got really tall. And my coaches said, sorry, you're too tall to be a competitive gymnast, and we don't think you really are going to be able to keep going. So you might want to consider another sport. Now, at the time, talk about an obstacle you can't change. I can do nothing about my height. And I thought, well, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I'm not going to be able to continue working toward my dream of being an amazing gymnast who goes to the Olympics. But I got to discover new loves for other sports, and I became a competitive tennis player, a sport that I got so much joy out of. And I never would have done that if I had stayed on this track. And I may have been a mediocre gymnast if I had, insisted on continuing on. But instead I got to be a really good tennis player. And I think of a lot of obstacles in life that way. When I look back at the moments that were hardest, the biggest disappointments, I think, well, what wouldn't have happened in my life that I love and treasure now that was a direct result of that thing? So you can often look back on your life and see, here is a huge disappointment. But if that hadn't happened, I never would have met this best friend, or I never would have developed this love for golf, or I never would have been able to move to this new state and discover something new. So I think it's great to practice that in your life, to look back and think, geez, that seemed like such a big obstacle at the time, but I'm so glad that happened because this other great thing never would have happened if that disappointment hadn't happened first.